What's going on, guys? It's Dave Heilman, aka Dynasty Dorks, and this is the 5-Minute Fantasy Football Podcast, presented to you by the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Today's going to be an extended episode talking about a mock draft that we completed with some of the most fun people in the Twitter space. Got two of the drafters here with me. We're going to talk about our teams, talk about some different team builds, what you can do from drafting from the early or the end of the draft. And this is a Superflex 12-team PPR format with a snake, no third round reversal. So first, introduce the guests. Jeremy, how we doing, sir?
What's up? Just over here, living life, getting ready for football season. We had some preseason football, so got some coming up this weekend. The Expo, if you're going to that, so I'm trying to get some content in prior to this weekend because I know this weekend we'll have none. But
I will not be
excited
out
to
there,
talk about this draft.
I will not be out there. So if you see Popes, give him a hug for me. Brock, new to the space a little bit. You're doing great things, man. Make sure you give Brock a follow. Make sure you give Popes a follow too. Brock, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's nice to meet you guys and dive into this draft. It's something where I'm not doing too many redraft Superflex leagues, so this was real fun to go ahead and kind of scratch that part of the brain because this is more on the dynasty side. Redraft's more single QB, so kind of merging those two.
Yeah, it's and drafts are right around the corner, so wanted to get some mock draft content, and I didn't want to just do a bunch of bots. So first some housekeeping. Make sure you go to Underdog Fantasy, use promo code FFSGPN so they know we sent you. And then thank you to our guests, Genesis Fantasy, Popes, Team 4. That he must have left us. The points after Senra, my guy Kyle Senra. Coach Steve runs some awesome leagues, different formats. Just Josh, thanks for joining. Herbalicious, my boy Justin, thanks for joining. Jordan Cantaloupe and J Mark Football. Make sure you give him a follow. So let's go off 101. Brock, talk about it.
Yeah, so 101 is a tricky spot here, I think, especially in a Superflex type build because you feel like you're doing a disservice with not going McCaffrey, but at the same time, doing McCaffrey, you got to wait another 22 picks before you get a chance to take your quarterback. Again, this is Superflex, so you do want to get two elite ones. And again, this guy, he did take Brock Purdy at the 2-3 turn, but for his team specifically, going 3 running backs in your first 4 picks isn't something I typically do. It is fun to kind of experiment with in mock drafts. I know we were talking about that robust draft strategy with the running backs, taking them all early, kind of seeing how it plays out. But yeah, not a huge fan of this team, honestly. I think if you scroll down a bit, he also went 2 tight ends within his first 10 rounds as well. So trying something new. It's just clearly the receivers are taking a hit. Receivers are going to be Malik Neighbors, George Pickens, and then William Sutton and Quentin down there. So interesting strategy. He's got the elite running backs. He's got a couple good quarterbacks, 2 nice tight ends, and then the receivers I don't think are going to be able to compete with some of these other teams. But yeah, I'm interested to see maybe what you guys would have done differently. Do you think maybe with the 101, you pass on McCaffrey and kind of take the hit and go with a Hurts and go with an Allen and then kind of wait on that running back position? Or how would you guys approach that?
Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, I would have skipped McCaffrey. Superflex is always a quarterback. At no point would you ever, even at 1-1, I get the love for Christian McCaffrey, but as you can even see here, he got Barkley at 212. Like really the drop off from McCaffrey to Barkley, you could argue is pretty steep, but we're also kind of, I would think we should expect a little bit of a decline from McCaffrey, not necessarily a decline, but maybe a hold back a little bit. I mean, they did pound the rock with him last season, and they may be looking to maybe tamper that load a little bit here headed into this season. So I would have still went quarterback. That would have been my probably biggest difference. But I mean, he turned out all right though. I mean, Purdy, Cousins, Bryce Young, like, I mean, if those quarterbacks, if Young kind of takes a step, I don't hate this team. I think his receivers are really weak. That's probably where it's going to struggle. But I mean, McCaffrey, Barkley, Cook, they all stay healthy. I mean, that's 3 top 12 running backs right there in PBR. So like that's a huge advantage. But other than that, yeah, I mean, I probably would have went quarterback, and that probably would just been slightly different.
Yeah, I would just echo the same thoughts. So I'm going to go on to number 2, and that's my team. So I took Jalen Hurts. He's my QB1 this year. Josh Allen's been the QB1 over the last few years, and he could easily do it as well. But with with some of the changes going on in Buffalo, I felt more comfortable with Hurts. And you have Jonathan Taylor for my second pick. So waited till the third round for receiver. So I went back-to-back receiver here. It's fun picking early, getting one of those top guys, but it sucks waiting. Was not expecting to go Marvin Harrison Jr. with my first. But I did wait on my next quarterback for a little while, because you can see in some drafts, you see the first 12 out of the first 14 picks are quarterbacks, and you're like, holy crap. And so I kind of let the board come to me here. I got Trevor Lawrence. I got Marvin Harrison Jr., then Michael Pittman. I got Trevor Lawrence, and then Ramondre Stevenson, Jake Ferguson. So kind of a balanced strategy. Get my quarterbacks in the first 5 rounds, get my two running backs in the first 6 rounds. Then I had 2 receivers in the middle. Jake Ferguson, I feel like he's kind of that last tight end that I'm interested in. Key performance indicators for me are guys that are going to be top 2 on their team in targets, and guys that are going to get red zone targets. And I think Jake Ferguson checks both boxes. Jaden Reed, I really like him as my 3. He was one of those guys where he got a lot of action in the red zone. When you look at his red zone targets, almost all of them were first read red zone targets. He also had red zone carries, plays that were designed to him. Calvin Ridley, this was before the Hopkins injury, but Ridley's a guy they paid a lot of money for. Hopkins is on the decline. I think Ridley gets a ton of volume there in a more pass-heavy approach with Callahan going to Tennessee. Hopefully their offensive line can actually block this year. Brian Robinson, I think he's quiet little bell cow there. I'm not sure what Austin Eckler is going to do, but I like Robinson. He's been pretty consistent. Goddard, Hill, Hill in the Superflex is fun.
Yeah.
Palmer, Kendra Miller, and then Brandon Cooks, another guy. They had a lot of first read targets in the red zone on a team that I think is going to pass the ball a ton. Zeke Elliott is their number 1 running back. I think that they're just going to air the ball out in Dallas. So you guys, Brock, anything different as far as what you've done with my spot?
No, I actually like the build here, and I think this is a good strategy for someone in the early parts of the draft. And it's interesting that Popes did it as well, where you get that elite quarterback and then you get the elite running back. And it's something where I think the elite running backs also do fall off a cliff as well, right after that range of the Gibbs, Taylor, Barkley. You can make the argument for A-Chain, obviously, but that's more of a best ball. I want to take a stab at him late in the second. But yeah, I really like the build here, honestly. And I think for the receivers, you have some upside, obviously, with Marv. Pittman, I'm curious to see if they use him down the field a little bit more. I think last year with Minshew was a lot of underneath stuff. Obviously, AR back. Hopefully, they can get him more down the field, like he was doing earlier in his career in Indianapolis. And then at running back, rounding it out with Ramondre. I'm actually pretty high on Ramondre, honestly, for this year. Gave him the bag. I think he's going to be a workhorse there in New England. And they're going to be relying on that early with Brissett or if May gets in. So, yeah, I really like this team. The fact you're getting T-Law in the early 5th, I think is a huge value, honestly. Like, if we're looking at Herbert at the 305 and T-Law at the 502, are we sure that T-Law doesn't outscore Herbert there, or even a Tua and Goff there at the 4-5 or the 3-4 turn? So really like the value there. Really like this team build.
All right, Popes, 103.
Yeah, 103 was pretty easy for me here, at least in the beginning. Allen falls, like you'd mentioned. Allen's still the 101 for me at quarterback. I think that there's a lot to be made of this receiver room, but I think this receiver room will be a little bit better than people are anticipating it to be. Now for fantasy, maybe not, but as far as a overall production, it's going to be, I think, a little bit closer to what we saw Jordan Love get into last year. That ability to not force targets to players, which Allen felt, and you'd seen it if you watched his all 22. There was a lot of times he felt he had to get the ball to Diggs. And I get it. Diggs was a great talent, but there were times that he was forcing some things, and that's Allen. He's a gunslinger. He's going to do it. He's going to throw it up there. And they went and got that guy in Keon Coleman for him as well. So I'm not worried about it by any means. Also, still didn't really add a red zone running back. Yes, Ray Davis could be interesting, but I also don't know if they're going to roll Ray Davis out there and be like, oh yeah, well, here comes that. I think they'll still feed off of that a little bit and get Allen some free looks on maybe some bootlegs or something like that off of something like that. So I still think that the rushing touchdowns will be there. And like I said, when you mentioned it earlier, quarterback is where I always go in that first pick, unless like you're way back at the back half of the draft. But if you're top 5, I'm taking a quarterback for sure. And then Brock, you kind of mentioned on it how I kind of went the same direction as Dave here. And 2, it was Gibbs. So for me, it really just came down to, at least the way that I draft in Superflex, kind of comes down to watching players and then seeing who's available and where tier breaks start for me. And then I'm just going to take the best player available. So that's kind of what falls. I usually prefer to go a lot of receivers. But the way that this fell, where I was sitting at 210, like Wilson was gone, Nakua. So you're sitting there with a question mark and Marvin Harrison. I liked Devontae Adams, who I ended up getting coming back, but I did take Gibbs in the second because I was kind of like, let's get that anchor. Gibbs fell this far. It seems like good value to me. I'll take him here. He kind of can anchor that running back room. And then getting Devontae Adams, who I was thinking about at 2, was a plus there in the third round. And then when it came up to me again at 4, I was kind of in that another no man's land for me at receiver, who I probably would have taken either Pittman or Mike Evans at 4. So you taking Pittman, Dave, made a lot of sense. I was really torn between him or McBride. I chose to go McBride and kind of get that advantage a little bit at the tight end position, hopefully. And then Mike Evans came back in 5. I really like that. I think Evans is in line for a similar season that we've seen the last 10 years. Definitely a guy that's going to be consistent for me. In this area of the draft, I try to find guys that aren't going to hurt me. I still want upside, obviously, but you want that safety in those first picks, because if you don't miss, that's going to beat probably 6 other guys that missed on these picks trying to go more upside than going with a safer asset that's not going to necessarily bust in that category outside of an injury. 6 was Connor. I really like Connor this year. I think if he can stay healthy, it's going to be great for him in Arizona. I think Harrison, McBride, Mike Williams, Zay Jones, Kyler Murray back healthy. Like, this offense is going to be a little bit sneakier than people think for fantasy, I think. So getting him here in the 6th felt really good. Cooper, another guy. It's a little bit more of a boomer bust factor there at that receiver position, but again, a consistent producer, probably a top 24 guy. Nick Chubb, it's kind of a late season thing. I've already got Gibbs and Connor. Chubb can kind of get me. If those guys can get me close to the playoffs, Chubbs could be that piece that pushes me over in the playoffs. So I kind of was like, all right, I'll take the risk here. 9, I had to address the second quarterback position. I'm a player that doesn't necessarily love or feel the need, I guess, to say go quarterback. I know a lot of people are like, get 3 quarterbacks in Superflex, get 2. I have some dynasty teams that have 1 quarterback. And I mean, I don't always win, but like, I mean, I'm okay being a little risky in that category because it's still a flex spot. I mean, I could put in a receiver or a running back. So I went with Will Levis, a little bit risky, but a high upside there in Tennessee with a lot of weapons around him. So I've risked it there a little bit, I guess. 9 and 10 is kind of the same way. I went with Keon Coleman. If this works out, though, stack of Coleman and Allen is going to be really nice. Coleman's already putting some good stuff out there in training camp. And then I just kind of shirt up again with some of the deeper. At this point, I kind of switched to, I've got my 3 to 4 starters at receiver and flex. So I went to the well on the running backs in the next 2 in Edwards and Charbonnet. Edwards probably the lead in LA for now. Charbonnet could have a role depending on there. Then I went high upside with Luke Musgrave at tight end in 13. 14 again's an upside swing in Jahan Dotson. And then 15 as well. I thought Jaleel McLaughlin in the 15 is a really good value just in case they decide to go to him significantly more than Javonte Williams. We've seen definitely Sean Payton offenses like to get the ball into the running back's hands at the in the passing game. Bo Nix probably will be a little bit into that same similarity as well, kind of get the ball out of his hands and get that into the playmakers. So if McLaughlin can work out that role and you have a split between him and Javonte Williams, I think just that alone is going to give him some pretty good standalone value, let alone handcuffs. So
yeah, just realized
I liked it.
That third quarterback.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of people like it, and I completely ignore it more times than not. Because to me, I mean, I get it. I understand why people do it, but especially if you're playing redraft, like if one of your top 2 goes down, like who's your third? Like Derek Carr, like he's going to get me 15 points.
Yeah,
I could easily roll out Gus Edwards, who can get me 20 if he hits the end zone that week. You know what I mean? So
For sure.
for me, I like to play dangerously that way. Not everybody does, but I just think that it's super flex. Like I can put anybody out there. So I'm not going to take Derek Carr over, say, like I said, Charbonnet, who could be the lead back if something happens to Walker.
No, I like that. Let's talk about team number 4. Start out with CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, so with team 4, I honestly like what they did here. I think getting 3 elite receivers there. They got CeeDee, they got Nico, and Devontae Smith. I really like, and going the back-to-back QB tight end there in the second or third. Was this a tight end premium?
No.
Dave? No. So Laporta 3-3 then might be a little bit early. I know a lot of people are really high on him this year. I'm not probably paying that cost, honestly. As you can see, my draft, I waited 3.5 rounds and I got Kittle. So it's like I'm totally fine doing something like that, kind of that, like there's like 6 or 7 guys I'm comfortable with. But outside of that, I think that the team build is very balanced, is what you can say. But the big area is obviously running back. And the two areas I want to kind of touch on are Mostert and Brooks there in the 7th and the 8th. I'm personally staying away from Brooks in all of my best ball drafts on Underdog and maybe in these redraft leagues. You are kind of playing for that maybe week, 8 to 10 to the end of the year type thing. But something happens with Mostert. He's been known to get injured, or maybe Dolphins lost some good guys on their O line. Maybe he's not reproducing what he was last year. Outside of Jacobs, he doesn't really have anyone. Mostert and Brooks, they're not too confident there in that RB room. But outside of that, I do like taking some swings late on Geno and Bo Nix, who both seem to be the starter as of now. So he does get his QB2 and QB3. And then I do like the deep shots late on the rookie receivers, Jalen Polk or AD Mitchell, if they can be wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 there with AD in Indianapolis. I think that there could be a real possibility those rookies start popping off late in the year. And then I really like the Zach Moss pick. Honestly, it's funny right now. I feel like every day we kind of go back and forth with, is it Chase Brown running with the ones, or is it Zach Moss running with the ones, and Orlando Brown hyping one up, and then one's listed on the depth chart as the one. So it's kind of a little bit fuzzy there right now in that Bengals backfield. But hey, if Moss is the guy, he proved to be really effective last year when JT was out. Then he could have just hit on a sleeper there later in the I think that was the 10th or 11th round. So yeah, don't hate this team. I actually really like the build. And I do like going CD early. I don't know if I would go CD at the 1-4. I think I'm still going to go Mahomes or Lamar or AR. But getting that elite receiver, you really can't knock anyone for it.
Yeah, it's pretty safe pick. And as much as we want to say quarterbacks have been safe, we had like 64 different starters last year, and there's only 32 teams.
Yeah.
And the year before was about the same. This longer schedule has created more quarterbacks. We did some previews just to check it out. We did 5-minute previews, and I did the Bengals and went over Mike Clay's projections, and he's got Zach Moss for more carries, but he's got Chase Brown for more fantasy points and finishing a little higher. Both of them were in the early high-end RB3 range. He didn't really like either of them. So the the point after, make sure you give them a follow. Patrick Mahomes to start off, Puka Nacua at number 2, then Justin Herbert in the 3rd round, Brandon Ayuk in the 4th round, Isaiah Pacheco in the 5th, DeAndre Swift in the 6th, T. Higgins in the 7th, and Njoku in the 8th. Really like the first 2 picks, Mahomes and Nacua. Mahomes, I know that last year, the Kansas City Chiefs were down, but he's still pretty good for fantasy. He led the league in scramble yards. It's like he was not a rushing quarterback, but he got plenty of rushing yards due to all those scrambles, especially in those close games. And this offense, they somehow got a little bit better this offseason by getting some of these weapons that they've gotten. He didn't have a lot of weapons last year, and Kelsey started off injured. Kelsey's healthy. They, Rashee Rice, we don't know what's going to happen with him, but they added Worthy, added Hollywood Brown. And so Puka, the knee injuries going on that happened after the draft. We'll see if that affects him. And Herbert, both those, news came later on after this happened. And Ayuk, this is some fake news about Ayuk. He still is a 49er, but didn't like the Herbert pick. Just think it's a little early. I like some of the guys that are in this range. I think you could fall back and get, 3 or 4 rounds later and get a guy like Trevor Lawrence, or even go with, just a round later and getting Jared Goff or Jaden Daniels and get more, and then get a better player here in the 3rd round. So Mahomes and Herbert are his quarterbacks. His receivers are Puka, Ayuk, and Higgins. I like the receivers a lot. I mean, I think if you took Ayuk in the 2nd round, I'd be fine with that. But getting him in the 4th round is nice. If he gets traded to the Patriots, then maybe that's not that great of a pick. But he's probably going to be a Niner. If not, you have other options like the Steelers. Pacheco and Swift. I like Pacheco. Not a huge fan of Swift, but I think he's properly priced here, and you're getting him probably right around where he finishes. The problem in the last couple of years is you're paying, RB1 prices and getting RB2 production, now you're paying RB2 prices. And so if you get RB2 production, you're going to be just fine. Pretty solid team build here. Got Njoku at the tight end position. And so, you just hope you get that Njoku that you saw at the end of the year with Flacco, that the team is able to get that connection with him and Watson. Romadunze, if something were to ever happen to Keenan Allen or DJ Moore, you'd see a lot more out of him. I don't know if you're going to see that this year. It could be a JSN situation where, you hope, man, if he gets single coverage, he's going to be unstoppable. Well, we said the same thing with Gino, and it just did not. Well, not Gino, a JSN last year didn't work. We'll see with the Dunze. It's just, it's a lot of mouths to feed. Drake May, things are not sounding good from camp. We'll see what goes on with him, but we've heard camp reports lead us in the wrong direction before. Trey Benson, love that pick. If James Conner were traded or went down today, Trey Benson would be a top 15 back, and you're getting him here in the 11th. Like, you don't play for second place. You want to win your league, and this is how you do it, taking shots like this at the end. Romeo Dobbs, a smart guy. Popes put out a post earlier, said that Dobbs is his favorite priced Green Bay receiver. I like that. Cole Kmet, he must be a Bears fan. Cole Kmet here is his backup. Tight end, Jalen Wright. Brock talked earlier about, the fragility of the Miami running backs. He's behind, he's a really good back with high upside. He's just buried behind two guys, but neither of them have shown to be, healthy. And so he could, somehow get some work at the end of the season. He could be someone that, hits then, Dontavian Wicks here in the last round. Jeremy, any thoughts on the point after?
Yeah, it's not my favorite. I probably would have skipped Herbert, like you said. I mean, just imagine this roster with, like, say, taking Chris Olave there instead. So you have Nakua, Olave, Ayuk, and then you switch back and say you skip Higgins and you took Watson or Mayfield in the 7th. Like, that just seems a little nicer to me. But yeah, I like it. I think it's solid. I think this is kind of it's either going to win the league or they're not making the playoffs. Just with all the swings late. You know what I mean? Like, I think that a lot of these guys have high upside, but they also have really low floors. So, yeah. Don't hate it.
Let's move on to the next one. Let's move on to the next one. You have Senra says.
All right. I actually really like this one, like, looking through it. I love the start. It's the traditional start that I kind of have tended to lean towards, going double quarterback, taps in Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, two guys that have really top 6 upside, truthfully. Dak Prescott's going to be throwing a lot. You mentioned it earlier, Dave, as far as like CeeDee Lamb having a ton of opportunities. I think, Brock, you mentioned something as well. Mm-hmm. So Dak's going to be throwing probably a lot again this season. So I think it's a good spot to get him. I think it's a fair price or fair area where he took them. I don't know if it's a great value, but I think where he went quarterback overall position seems about right for him. But I like going Jackson and Dak Prescott. The pick that loses it for me is A-Chain. I know a lot of people absolutely love Devon Achane, but for me, I don't. Let's put it that way. I think the upside's super huge there, but I think, again, we saw it last year. He's not going to be able to handle a ton of touches at the NFL level. Yes, he was hyper efficient, and could he be that way again in this offense? 100%. Will not argue that up till I'm blue in my face, but Mostert's still going to be heavily involved. I think people are discounting him a lot. We mentioned it with Jalen Wright. If Mostert goes down, Wright's going to step in for that role as well. Both of those guys are the bigger guys, probably more your red zone guys. We also saw Jalen Waddle struggle to stay healthy last season, so they did kind of tone down a little bit in the passing game. I think if you continue to see Waddle stay healthy, Hill's healthy all year, they added Odell Beckham, who says they don't step back a little bit from the run, and maybe there's less opportunities there to be had for all of these running backs. Just a little messy for me. Obviously, the swing here is hoping that he is the lead guy, which I think a lot of people are anticipating because of where people have him ranked. I'm very, very low on A-Chain compared to the consensus, and I could be wrong. I just don't know if a guy his size is really going to be able to hold up 17 games and give us great production. So I don't love this pick, but outside of that, I think this draft gets really good. Mark Andrews in the 4th. Again, I took one there as well, a tight end. So I like that, tight end premium or not. It's still an advantage getting one of these top 5 guys. Cooper Kupp, great value. I think Kupp may still be the guy in this offense. We're starting to hear some reports out of camp as well that it's kind of running through Cooper Kupp. Yes, Puka Nacua had a great season last year, but a lot of injuries in that room. And even when Kupp was back, he still wasn't fully healthy. You now have a fully healthy Cooper Kupp. I think he's probably going to maybe potentially even outproduce Puka Nacua this season. So I think that that's well within the range of possibilities. So I think that Kupp getting him here in the 5th is going to be a really good value. DK Metcalf, again, a consistent guy. Doesn't really have the ceiling because of such a crowded room, but a nice guy to have as your receiver too. Aaron Jones is unlimited upside in that Minnesota offense if he gets that entire workload. Hollywood Brown with the Chiefs could be a guy, good deep threat guy. I think he's be a little inconsistent, but I think it's a nice guy to have there as your potential flex because it was set up 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex. So I think that's a really good spot. DeAndre Hopkins, good spot too as a flex player. Singletary, nice shot there. I think he's going to be a consistent guy that you could plug in on some bye weeks. Probably won't start much for you. Elliott's a really good piece here, I think, as well. I think he's just going to have a ton of touchdown upside. So I like the shots here on these running backs that they took. Then we have Tyler Lockett, again, safety valve there as far as your back end flex. Chuba Hubbard, a guy that's going to probably see some good work here in the first half of the season, potentially longer, depending on how long they hold off on Brooks. And then I think my favorite pick in this is Adam Thielen in the 15th. I think Thielen is like a super great value in redraft right now. Like Panthers are going to throw a lot and they're not going to give 200 targets to Deontay Johnson. And I think Adam Thielen is still going to have a pretty big role. As much as we love Xavier Legette, he already has a foot injury. That's going to slow his progression a little bit here coming into the league. Jonathan Mingo, reports are he's a little bit better than he was last year, but that's not that hard because he was absolutely terrible. So I'm not sold on anybody in this room outside of DJ and Adam Thielen. And I think Thielen is a really good value here in the 15th. He could end up being like his consistent flex player. Do I think he's like top 12? No. Do I think he could be top 24 potentially, but unlikely? I think he probably fits in that real good flex player, strong flex player for you most of the season there in Adam Thielen. So I really like this roster. I feel like if I was in that spot, my team would look very similar. Let's put it that way.
So we'll do the PSA for the name of the week is Xavier Legette. That is the pronunciation. And if you want a great country accent, just look up Xavier Legette. No, I agree with that breakdown. Brock, let's talk about your squad.
Yeah. So Jeremy, you kind of mentioned it earlier, but I feel like I went for a really kind of fragile, super high ceiling build as well. I went to UF, so maybe there's a little bit of bias in there with taking AR early, but I honestly think if he does stay healthy, like we saw what he is, we saw the usage he's going to get running the ball. I mean, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, like that 12 to 15 rushing touchdown range, he could easily hit that, and he doesn't need to throw for more than probably 200 yards per game, and he'll still probably average more than 20 points at the position. So yeah, I went him in the first, and then on the way back, Garrett Wilson, I think, is in for a monster season. There's a lot of different, metrics with, what he can achieve or what he's done with obviously Zach Wilson, Mike White, all the bad quarterbacks the past couple of years. Now, obviously, he gets Rodgers. We all know this. But whenever a Rodgers receiver gets hyper targeted, like we've seen in the past, they're pretty much always a top 5 option at the position. So as long as they both stay healthy, I think that would be a really great pick there. I mean, he could honestly outscore A.J. Brown, outscore Jamar Chase. That wouldn't surprise me at all if we look back a year from now. And then in the third, and like you mentioned there, Jeremy, as well, I don't like typically going with the 2 quarterbacks there early. But I think Caleb there in the third, again, swinging for upside. If he is what we expect him to be, then I think he's going to absolutely smash this year. Obviously, Caleb in the third and maybe Jaden Daniels in the fourth. I'd probably take Jaden Daniels a bit cheaper. Looked like he wouldn't have fell to me, but I really like those 2 quarterbacks, really high upside with AR and Caleb. And then in the receivers, 2 guys that have the talent, just haven't had the situations. Garrett Wilson and London are kind of my 2 anchors there. And then I did a strategy that I typically do on Underdog as well, where I kind of wait on the running backs, kind of those values in the third and then in the fourth. I saw a big drop off. Didn't want to take Derrick Henry over the quarterback, and then didn't want to take like a James Cook or a Jacobs over a London there in the fourth. So I got Rashad White, who I'm actually pretty high on this year. They bring in Bucky Irving, but I think Rashad's still going to handle the the majority of the goal line touches, honestly, there, all of the red zone work. And Bucky can maybe eat a little bit of the receiving game. But again, very, very undersized. I think Rashad's still the 3-down guy there, hopefully. And then Kittle, I still want to get an elite tight end. Maybe if Ayuk gets traded, I got some luck there. Maybe his ADP would bump up around, if we were to do this today. But yeah, I wanted to make sure to get an elite tight end, get these running backs late with Rashad and with David Montgomery. David Montgomery doesn't really have the ceiling, so maybe that doesn't play into the team build. But if something were to happen to Gibbs, I think he's easily like a top 8 to 10 option in that offense. And outside of that, he's going to get the majority of the work, probably from the 20 to the 20. I don't know about the receiving work, but I still like him with a nice floor there. Keenan got a nice little stack there with Caleb, and also think he might be in line for wide receiver 2 here in Chicago. Maybe a guy that Caleb looks to. Maybe, I don't know, when he's pressured a lot more kind of just underneath routes. Keenan runs a lot of outs and runs a lot of ins and slants, so that could be good there. Addison's got that court hearing, I know, October, so we'll have to see about him, but I think the value was kind of baked into that. I think we did this draft after all that news happened or just shortly after, so I think getting him in the 9th is great. Same with Reishi in the next pick as well, but I think the big area of the draft that maybe would win or lose this league is like rounds 10 to 13, honestly. The back-to-back running backs there I kind of like with Javonte and with Tajay. I feel like Javonte is kind of like, a guy people are either, I don't know, in or out of, I guess. But second year removed from all those injuries, I think maybe, like you mentioned, Jeremy, Sean Payton's offenses do love peppering the running backs with targets. So maybe if it is him, Samaje Perine's cut or something, he was taking 30%, like 60 targets last year. So maybe those get distributed to Javonte. Estime is probably going to be maybe an early down guy if he gets worked in, 5th round pick in the 2024 draft. And then obviously Jaleel McLaughlin is more of a receiving kind of scat back type build. So it's going to be interesting there. Tajay, I really like this year. He averaged almost like 1 point per touch or something like crazy last year. I was looking at it where we get him more touches, get him on the field more. I think it'd be awesome to get him here in the 11th. And then I also am a Steelers fan, so I had to double down with the Russin with the Fields. It's a little bit interesting. I did get Caleb. I did get AR. Why am I taking these, quarterbacks later? But I think if Fields hits, then this would be a great value. Obviously, for real football, don't know if he's going to bring us wins each week, but for fantasy, in that offense, I think with more stability around him, he could be a guy that's averaging 18 to 20 points per game as well. Then the late round shots on Gabe Davis and Isaiah Likely. If I were to do this draft again, I probably would have tried to grab a running back there instead of, if we scrolled up a little bit, instead of getting, let me see here. I took the running back there in the 5th. Yeah, so interested to see what you guys have to say about this one. It was one where I kind of shot for some upside, see how it went.
Yeah, I like the late picks. At the end of the day, I do think Tony Pollard probably has the backfield just because the way they quickly signed him and where he's been at. But if Tajay hits or if Javonte hits or just one of them hits, you're getting him in the double-digit rounds. And then Justin Fields. Justin Fields, again, there's not many of these 3rd or 4th, quarterbacks in that range that have that kind of upside where, yeah, he might rip off 5 losses in a row, but he's a top 5, top 10 quarterback the entire time. And so, and he might be in a little better situation. You saw what Arthur Smith did with Ryan Tannehill. You saw what he did with Marcus Mariota. They ran the ball a ton with the quarterback, design runs, especially in the red zone. And so Justin Fields and that Ryan Tannehill, shotgun approach, pistol, whatever they run, I like that. So, and Isaiah Likely, I just really like that upside pick. Again, you could get a guy that's going to, Hunter Henry or something like that with your last pick, and that'd be okay. But this guy's got some real upside. That could be like Mark Andrews again went down, which, has happened, then boom, you're right there. Jeremy?
Yeah, I don't hate it. Not really a ton of players. I'm not in on Drake London, so there I don't love that one. My question for you, I guess, would be why'd you take Addison over, say, Rashee Rice? Just out of curiosity, both have like that off the field issues.
Yeah,
Rice was obvious. I love Jordan Addison, so don't get me wrong. But I'm just curious, in your mindset of like, was it just kind of, let me just take Addison over Rice, or was there a reason? Like, do you not expect, Rice paired with Mahomes versus Addison with Darnold / McCarthy? Like, I just was curious.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like both have their obviously the off the field issues, but the main difference is that Addison's big change was at the quarterback position. Rashee Rice's big change was in the receiver room. So, I mean, we can't just – obviously, he was pretty good last year as a rookie, better than all we probably anticipated. But they do bring in Xavier Worthy. They do draft Xavier Worthy. They do bring in Hollywood Brown. And both guys are kind of those down-the-field guys where Rashee could be a little bit more around the line of scrimmage. He had a significant amount of screens last year, and that was kind of adding to this, perceived yak ability that I think the metrics are showing a little bit more than he was actually doing with just how quick they were getting him the ball. But yeah, that's the main thing here. It's like competition to the receiver room or a downgrade at quarterback. It kind of like puts them both on the same playing field for me. But looking back on this, like even a Deontay, I don't hate, in that pick as well. Bryce has got to throw it to someone. We don't want him to have 200 targets or we don't expect it, but I think he could be the clear alpha there where probably feel a little bit safer with Deontay over Addison. Just the upside's crazy. I think he had like 5 touchdowns in like the first 7 weeks or something last year. Like he's a very talented player. Again, the quarterback's the big question mark there, but I'd rather them worry about figuring that out in a Kevin O'Connell offense than, Mahomes has got to feed the ball now to Kelsey, to Worthy, to Rice, to Hollywood. But the fair point is there with Drake London in the 4th. It's like looking back on this, like Nico, I even like, or Ayuk would have been great picks there. But or if Kincaid fell, I might have went Kincaid, honestly.
Yeah. No, I get it. No, I was just curious because like I'm the opposite end of it. Like I think Rice is gonna be fine. I think people are over exaggerating. Like I love Xavier Worthy, I do, but I think the way that this fits in this and Hollywood, same way, like I think Rice is still gonna see for what they used him for. These guys aren't taking his role, in my opinion. So that's why I was just a little curious.
Yeah, no, for sure.
But other than that, yeah, I like it. I don't love the double tap on the quarterback. I already said I don't take quarterbacks, so I wouldn't have even looked at Wilson or Fields. Although I may have taken Wilson if he would have fell to me, but you took him, so ruined my draft. No.
Well, Coach Steve Pintado, please everybody go on there and tell Steve how much you hate his draft. He's a Dolphins fan, so he took Tyreek Hill in the 1st. But Tyreek Hill obviously is still a good pick. It was a homer pick, but in the 8th, in the pick 8, Tyreek Hill, pretty good. So the question for the chat is, would you take Tyreek Hill over Jefferson? Would you take Tyreek Hill over CJ Stroud and Kyler Murray in Superflex? So he went Tyreek Hill, Joe Burrow, Travis Kelce, Jaden Daniels. So he's still got 2 high-end quarterbacks. Burrow and Daniels it's a fun little balance. You got the more traditional pocket passer, and then you got Jaden Daniels, more of the rushing quarterback. Travis Kelce is no longer going to the 1st round, people. He's going in the 3rd. And so a lot of talk right now about the Chiefs receivers that we just discussed. Plus he's getting older. So everyone's waiting for the shoe to fall off. I still think he's got 1 or 2 more great years in him. And I think this year he's going to be solid. And we don't know what's going to happen with Rashee Rice. We don't know, like Xavier Worthy. We've seen the touchdowns. We've also seen where he gets, one arm knocked off of his routes pretty easily in press coverage. So we'll see how that translates. Jaden Daniels he could, same thing you talked about, Anthony Richardson. I mean, they could have very similar seasons and you're getting him 3 rounds less.
Yeah.
Yes, you're going to see a ton of rushing, a ton of, rushing production from both these guys, but who can get more than 20 passing TDs? Because Jalen Hurts, his first year at quarterback as a starter, he was awesome. He had, he had 10 rushing touchdowns. He had 800 yards on the ground. He was doing a lot of work, but he only had 16 passing touchdowns. So he finishes QB8, which was fine because you drafted him, late. But these guys are getting drafted pretty early. We're going to need to see them get over 20 passing touchdowns to be able to cash in on the price. DJ Moore and Tyreek Hill is a nice combination at receiver. He waited on running back, got Ken Walker and Najee Harris, his top 2 running backs. Don't love that. But Ken Walker, I'm fine with. Najee Harris, not really. I know Arthur Smith's going to run the ball a lot, but that production is going to be split pretty evenly with Jaylen Warren. And Najee's been super inefficient. So, being able to have him every week as your starter and count on him is really tough. Terry McLaurin, he's the third receiver in this one. But he's also got Rashee Rice, Christian Watson. So we got Tyreek Hill, DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, Rashee Rice, Christian Watson. Really like that receiver room. The tight ends, Travis Kelce, quarterbacks, Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels. It just comes down to comes down to the running backs. He's got Daniel Jones as his third quarterback, and the other running backs, he went rookies, Blake Corum and Marshawn Lloyd. Blake Corum, if anything happened to Kyron Williams, he'd be a stud. Anything happened to Josh Jacobs, Marshawn Lloyd would be a stud. And both these guys could end up seeing the field a little bit, in their roles anyways. We've seen Green Bay traditionally use two backs, and we saw Kyron Williams at his size not really be able to hold up to that big workload last year. Jerry Jeudy and Josh Downs, another smart guy. Popes put out a Jeudy post earlier. Jeudy in the 14th round is a lot better than we've been paying 7th and 8th round Jeudy. I think it's good value. And then Josh Downs, I was at training camp yesterday, and that dude is just shifty. I love him in the slot. A lot of first read targets last year. I do think with AR they try to go deep, but he is going to have to get some easy, quick decision. And I think Josh Downs has the slot locked down, and so you'll be able to see some targets, especially in PPR. Just Josh 187. Let's talk about it.
That's mine, right? No,
Yes.
There's a Brock's.
That's
Okay.
you.
Just double checking. I don't want to overstep here. I'm happy though, because this would be my team. Truthfully, there's only a couple different picks here that I probably would have made. So outside of my team, I think this is the other team that's going to win. No, joking, everybody, relax. But CJ Stroud at 1, I really like that. At 9 here, I don't hate it. It's a little early, but it's safer for me in this spot. I don't think Stroud really does much more than what we got last year, just because there is not much rushing. I'm going to actually talk about that in a podcast episode I make for my podcast in about 20 minutes here. But again, I do think that there's some value there. I like him at 1.9. Breece Hall in the second is really good. Double tapping in the third with Derrick Henry. Two guys that are going to be key parts of these offenses, hopefully high scoring offenses. And then Kincaid, huge upside there potentially for him this season in Buffalo as the main target for Josh Allen. Deebo Samuel in the 5th is really good value, especially considering now Ayuk's potentially going to be out of San Francisco. Where it starts to get a little dicey for me again is probably quarterbacks here going Stafford and Watson back-to-back at 6 and 7.
Yeah.
I get why a little bit, but I probably would have went elsewhere. If I'm looking at people who went after, say, Stafford, I probably would have went with a DK Metcalf there over Matt Stafford personally, or even Devonta Smith. And then coming back at 7, I probably would have went Watson then, or maybe I would have taken Stafford, and then coming back, I would have taken Christian Kirk over Watson. So I would have taken one quarterback there, not two. And then Hawkinson at 8 seems almost like you don't trust Kincaid, and seems like a waste of a pick at 8 because it's not tight end premium. And then are you thinking Kincaid's not going to be the thing? So you want Hawkinson on the back half? I was a little confused right there. So 6, 7, 8, just kind of meh for me there. I think that was going to be the spot that's going to kind of hurt this roster. And then, but then it makes it up. I think 9, Deontay Johnson's a steal. He's going to be peppered with targets. We kind of mentioned it when I was talking about Adam Thielen here just a minute ago. I think Johnson's going to be a clear target hog in that offense. I think JSN takes over Tyler Lockett's role a little bit. I think he becomes kind of the guy. I think in that new offense that Seattle's going to have, I think that you're going to see a pretty good viability here out of these receivers. Jerome Ford's a smash pick at 11. Yes, Nick Chubb is going to come back at some point. Yes, he was squatting, but we haven't seen him on the field. Yes, squatting, although it's a knee injury, squatting, yeah, it shows that it's getting there, but going up and down with some weights is different than left and right on a knee injury, which is kind of where you see the issues with some of that stuff. So until we see him going left and right, I'm still leery as far as when Chubb's going to be back. So I think Ford's a great pick here in the 11th. Curtis Samuel, I like that pick. I probably would have went running back there, but I do like Samuel, some huge upside again in that Buffalo offense. Rico Dowdle, again, playing behind Elliott, could be a guy that has a good option. Here in the 14th, I would have skipped Leggett and went with Jeudy, You mentioned it there, Dave. I think that Judy would have been a smash here in 14 and would have really put me over on this team, as well as then 15. I probably would have went like Ty Chandler over Tyrone Tracy. So I don't hate the team. Like I said, there's a lot of picks in here I would have made, especially at this spot. I'm actually in a draft now for Poly's playoff, and I kind of started the same way with Stroud and Hall. I think it went differently. I think I have Samuel in there as well. So like a lot of the picks that I would probably make myself. So I do. I like this draft. Just some questionable areas there in the middle with Stafford, Watson, and Hawkinson.
Yeah, I think the big thing is he took 3 quarterbacks and 2 tight ends before his second receiver. And
like in the first
yeah.
9 picks, he has 4 of them being quarterbacks, or
5 of them quarterbacks and tight
quarterbacks and
in
tight
the first
ends.
8 rounds. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in that round, same round as Hawkinson, that I would have taken over him. I get the name value and I get the upside. You know, if he comes back and looks good, you can probably trade him for somebody. But like the change at quarterback is another problem with for me with that. You have the change of quarterback. You could see a lot more rushing this year with the potential of Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy. And then you got Hawkinson is going to have to compete with Addison, compete with Justin Jefferson coming off of a significant late injury. So let's go. Go ahead.
I just don't like, real quick, I just don't like that like trade approach. Like, you know what I mean? Like, is that why you're taking it? It's good value. He's like, are they thinking, oh, I can trade? Like, you don't know how good your league's gonna be, like as far as like trades go. It's redraft. And then on top of that, you're looking at like you're gonna help your opponent by giving them TJ Hawkinson, like when you could have just taken like a much better value. So you know what I mean? It's just a little puzzled me there as far as that goes. But
yeah, and he just might have been thinking, I'm getting TJ Hawkinson as my backup tight end, which is pretty good too.
Yeah.
So next team.
Yeah. This team, I do like the receivers, but running back's a little bit tough. So start with Kyler Murray, who I was actually debating between there at the 107. So I really do like Kyler. You give him a wide receiver 1. He now has a tight end 1. Like you mentioned earlier, the ground game should be good there with Connor and Benson. I think this offense is going to be really good. We're only like 2 or 3 years removed from when they started like 10-0. I know it was like a fluky 10-0, but that was a thing a couple years ago where they were really good and then Kyler got hurt really bad and now he's back. So really like Kyler there at the 110 with that kind of hero quarterback almost, pairing it up with Rodgers there in the 5th. Again, it's like you get Rodgers in the 5th, or you could have waited and then taken Stafford in the 6th and then maybe gone like a Mixon in the 5th. I probably would have done, but I mean, you can't, that receiver room is probably the best one on the board. You get A.J. Brown, Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle, and then guys like Chris Godwin and Ladd McConkey. So really love the receiver room here. And then running backs is where you kind of lose me a little bit. I do like Kamara this year if he's getting the receiving work. New offensive coordinator, but outside of that, it might just be the same old offense with Derek Carr, who just loves targeting the running back a lot. So as long as Kendre Miller doesn't take that huge next step, Jamal Williams, when he doesn't take that goal line work, he's getting up there in age. So it's like, I don't hate it. I'm not overly in love with it, but the big thing here, I think the team is contingent on whether or not you hit on a Zamir White, Chase Brown, or J.K. Dobbins. One of those has to hit, or essentially I don't see this team making it too far. But then again, the receivers might carry you. So it's like you go one way or another with one of these two positions, running back or receiver. The other one looks a little bit light, but maybe the receivers make up for those points. You can earn points in a bunch of different ways from a bunch of different positions. There's no one way to build a team or win a league. So, but overall, I really do like the start of this. And then maybe some of the running back picks could have been changed a little bit later. The only thing is that I think his only tight end. Yeah, so the tight ends were Pat Freiermuth, who I am a Steelers fan, but I'm not super high on Pat this year. And then Cade Otton, who actually was pretty good for the Bucs last year. So I really like that as a late round kind of stab there to pair with Pat. But yeah, interesting team. I think it's different than anyone we've covered thus far with the receivers early. Typically, this is something we see more in a single QB or something more in a best ball where you snack them early, pair the running backs later. But yeah, I think the only difference would have been maybe snagging like a Mixon Kamara or like a Mixon Stafford. But yeah, outside of that, pretty good team.
Yeah, so I have Jefferson and Chase back to back. I mean, not many teams have ever been built with Jefferson and Chase together. He was able to accomplish that. Kyron Williams and Travis Etienne, so he's got strong receivers, strong running backs, and then Kyle Pitts, who we all are just you're hoping it finally happens. I mean, I know first year, 1,000 yards as rookie is a breakout. He was top 5 tight end, but Of course, it's not good enough for the people of fantasy. He was like 19, 20 years old when that happened too. They're still disgruntled, so everyone hates Kyle Pitts. But we do think this happens. I like the build so far, except for the quarterbacks. That's where we're going to see how this goes. So if you really kind of go a zero quarterback, this is what it looks like. Jefferson, Chase, Kyron Williams, Travis Etienne, Kyle Pitts, Stephon Diggs, then Baker Mayfield in the 7th, which I believe he was about the 20th quarterback off the board. Then you get Zay Flowers, Xavier Worthy, Tony Pollard, and then you have J.J. McCarthy, Derek Carr, and Sam Darnold, kind of a QB2 by committee. And then Rashid Shaheed, had to correct this pick. Jordan was going to protest the entire draft if he didn't get Rashid Shaheed. We made that happen because we got 9 picks later, and still no one had taken Shaheed off the board. In the Hunter Henry before, I meant to say Hayden Hurst earlier when I said taking some random late round guy. Hunter Henry is actually a decent pick here. We saw Jacoby Brissett in every team that he's been on go and target the tight end, and you may just get a volume tight end 1 here. Yeah, Henry's not gonna score a lot of touchdowns on that crappy offense. Yeah, he's not gonna get a whole bunch of yards after the catch, but you could see a guy here easily be number 1 or 2 on his team in targets, easily get 70 or 80 PPR points just on receptions, and he's your second tight end in the last round. So I'm totally fine with that. And Derek Carr, not a huge fan of Derek Carr. And then Sam Darnold and J.J. McCarthy. I believe in Kevin O'Connell. So I think his QB2 will be fine. I mean, last year, this guy, no matter what quarterback was in, you could plug him into your lineup, whether it was Nick Mullins, Josh Dobbs off of, learning the playbook overnight, whoever, anyone except for Jaron Hall. You just couldn't.
That was rough.
Jaron Hall couldn't stay healthy either. All right, let's talk about J-Mark squad.
Yeah. So Amon-Ra St. Brown, can't argue with that at 12. Pretty solid pick. Goes with Bijan next. I like those two. And I like his approach. He skipped quarterback in the first 2 rounds, but then double taps it at 3, 4, and Tua and Goff. Don't love the upside of either. I think Goff kind of falls back a little bit, but the stack with Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown's good. You probably got 2 borderline QB1, QB2. So solid production. They're not really going to hurt you, not going to really win you a week. So you're hoping St. Brown and Bijan kind of make that step for you. Ingram's a great pick here at 5, just a pure volume tight end that is due probably for a little bit of a touchdown positive regression, we'll say, with Ridley gone in Jacksonville. Mixon, I do like Mixon, but like the injuries already are starting up here for him early in camp. New offense, like, are they really pass heavy? Do they lean on Mixon? They're saying Dameon Pierce looks good. Like, what does this look like for him? I think that there's a lot of upside in Joe Mixon, but there's also a lot of risk. Like, it's a hamstring injury. Yeah. So that could linger, especially for a guy of his age. And then the wide receivers get really thin. But St. Brown and Kirk, I like those two. But after that, Tank Dell's the third option in that Texans offense. So unless CJ Stroud's throwing for 5,000 yards, it's going to be hard for him to return much. Jacoby Myers in a Minshew last Aiden O'Connell, Antonio Pierce led offense. Don't love it as a guy that I'm going to kind of have to count on, probably. Then he gets Minshew. Don't hate it as a third quarterback. Austin Eckler's a good dart throw late. Maybe he becomes your flex or your RB2. Brian Thomas Jr., not a guy I'm really that overly interested in. This year, I don't know. I know what he did at LSU. A lot of people are way higher than I am. Boy, that was bad English right there. And then Benson Knott, again, not a guy that I love. Kamani Vidal could be a good dart throw if the 2 injury-prone running backs ahead of him take a hit. So some dart throws here late. I don't hate that option, but I just really don't like 7, 8, 9. Again, kind of that middle of the draft. I feel like kind of even at 6, Mixon, I probably would have taken Kamara over Mixon. If I'm taking an older running back, Like Kamara safe with the dump off passes, like you guys mentioned earlier. So kind of 6, 7, 8, 9. I feel like that kind of hurts him a little bit there. 7, I don't mind Kirk, but like just because what you're asking him as your wide receiver 2 seems like a lofty expectation.
Yeah, and he went Ingram already, so I don't really love that too much. Ingram and Kirk.
Yeah, there's a lot of stacking here, like on the same teams, like
and Brian Thomas. Yeah,
yeah, Ingram, Kirk, Brian Thomas. Then you got like Myers, Minshew, O'Connell. What else we got here? Dell and Mixon. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of double tapping like the same.
Says he's a
team here.
Bears fan, but this board says he's a Jags fan.
Yeah,
I
he's
think
also
lying.
a little slotty at receiver.
Yeah, the receiver.
You've seen the height supremacist this episode of the league. He is not a height supremacist. He is okay with short guys because he's drafted a whole bunch of them. The running back depth is what concerns me. If Eckler is not a thing, that's his third running back. So if Mixon were to go down, this team is done. He doesn't really have much depth at the running back position. And, this whole like handcuff quarterback situation, I don't know. I mean, are either of them going to be that fantasy relevant, and you're getting both of them. So
yeah, it seems like a waste of a pick. Like
He
you're
could've
not
taken
like
Pollard.
handcuffing.
Taken Pollard in the
Like
10th.
I even like question like McCarthy and Darnold. Like, yeah, you want a third quarterback, I guess, but like if both of these teams could have taken more upside swings later. Do you know what I mean? Like,
we'll talk about the quarterbacks here real quick. And so, first thing I want to talk about is, it's super flex. So that means that in the extra flex position, you can put a quarterback in there. So most people are going to get 2, 3, or 4 quarterbacks on their teams. And so you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in the first round. Then you have only 2 in the next round. So, or actually 3 in the next round. So that gives you 10 quarterbacks in the first 2 rounds. Honestly, that's a little light to what I traditionally see, but every draft's a little bit different. So in these kind of drafts where you see 10 quarterbacks go off the board, I'm not going to panic and go get that, second quarterback right away. That's not what I did here. And then we saw 1, 2, 3, 4 in the next round, and then only 2 in the next round. So, right there, you have 16 quarterbacks off the board and in the first 4 rounds, which is pretty light for Superflex. But then looking at value, I do think it drops off after the 6th round. And so if I'm going to go get a quarterback and you want that 2 quarterbacks in Superflex, I'm going to make sure that I get 2 in the first 6 rounds. And for me, like I said, I want kind of the hero approach, getting Jalen Hurts early. Then I'm going to get Lawrence, in the 5th or 6th round. When you get a guy that maybe is a little bit later, like a Tua, that's when you're going to have to go and get a Goff or somebody to get a higher end second quarterback. As far as late round guys, I thought it was really interesting how many people did that like package approach of like, I don't know who the starter is, so I'm going to get them both. We had Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, JJ McCarthy and Sam Darnold, Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. Buy one, get one free. So, we'll see. Did Jaden Daniels? No, Jaden Daniels and Brissett didn't go, but there are some of those ambiguous quarterback situations where you don't know who it's going to be. And so you're just hedging your bet. And at the end of the day, it's an upside bet because, you look at, if you were to get Aiden O'Connell and he starts 13 games, would you rather Aiden O'Connell or Adonai Mitchell? Yes, you want Aiden O'Connell, the quarterback. If Sam Darnold ends up starting half the games this year, you'd much rather have him than Xavier Legette. Or Kate Otten. So I like the idea there, but for me, like I said, I'd rather get somebody that is, I'm certain Will Levis is going to be the starter. Bryce Young is going to be the starter all year. And then for the rest of it for quarterbacks, like I said, if they're any potential to be a starter, they're going to be drafted. So to get your second quarterback, again, I'm getting my second quarterback before the 6th round, at least by the end of the 7th round. And you see there's an actual tier gap. After Watson and Mayfield, there's not another quarterback drafted until the 9th. So let's talk about running backs. Brock.
Yeah, so for the running backs, if you don't mind scrolling up real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we kind of touched on it earlier, but I really like that running back range at the end of the second. It's pretty much who you're going to be getting in the mid to late first in a non-super flex league. It's kind of that group of outside of McCaffrey, that next tier are the next five guys, in my opinion, with Bijan, Brees, Gibbs, Taylor, and Saquon. So I think that's going to be your first tier is going to be McCaffrey and then those five guys. And then outside of there, there's kind of like that other little clump of A-Chain, Henry, Kyron, and ETN. And then outside of that, I think everybody from pretty much like the James Cook, Jacobs range, all the way to like the Aaron Jones, David Montgomery range, they're pretty all similar to me. I'm not going to lie. I think all the guys within the Jacobs, Pacheco, Rashad, Connor, Swift, Ken, Kamara, Demont, it's like there's really nothing there that's just like making me, oh, I have to take this guy 2 to 3 rounds above one of the other ones. And that was pretty reflective in my draft. I pretty much just waited. I didn't have to get, the James Cook in the 5th or the 4th, or I didn't have to reach on like a Swift or a James Conner in the 6th. I went tight end there. But I think that's the big thing here is if you do miss out on one of those elite running backs early, then there are opportunities to go back to back with them in later rounds. And we can see that here. Team 4 went Jacobs Mostert 5-7. Points after went Pacheco Swift. I went Rashad Montgomery. You see Ken Walker Najee, Kamara Zamir. So a lot of these teams went with a similar approach, kind of going receivers, maybe getting the quarterbacks and maybe getting the lead tight end early, and then doing like that back-to-back running back in this pocket of your draft between the 5th and I would call it the 5th and the 7th, I think is that kind of like that range where it's kind of like I don't want to call it the dead zone because all these guys have clear, a clear path to being workhorses for the team and getting the volume and being efficient. Obviously, you're going to have some preferences within there over some other ones. But yeah, I really like that range of running back. And then outside of there, you're pretty much just taking swings, either uncertainty with, Zeke or Dowdle or with a Moss, Chase Brown, or maybe just an iffy offense with like a Singletary or like the Brian Robinson and the Eckler argument. But I think that range is really where you want to make sure you get 2 to 3 running backs before. So round 8, I would say.
Yeah, and it comes back to like replacement value. And you look at some of these guys like Devin Singletary. It could be, Brian Robinson Jr. or look at a Gus Edwards could be a double touchdown guy. You're getting them so much later than like the guys that you said like we wouldn't call it the dead zone, but a lot of people do call it the dead zone. And so like, what's the replacement value between Najee Harris and Brian Robinson Jr. when you can get a Keenan Allen in this range? You could go get a Jaden Reed or a Tank Dell and then get Brian Robinson instead of Najee Harris, or, Zach Moss or Devin Singletary instead of Najee Harris. And then there's not many receivers going in this round at all. And so,
there's a sweet spot. And then if you miss it, you don't want to start reaching. You want to be fluid with the draft.
Yeah, and then you got some of these guys like Trey Benson and stuff that are just, if you hit on that, it's a home run. Jeremy, let's talk about the receivers real quick.
Yeah, I mean, so when it comes down to receiver, it's pretty simple. Get some good ones. So typically you see it here. It's quarterbacks and receivers in the first round, and you're going to see that. I've seen that all over and over again here lately. It's kind of the new way. The running backs kind of fall out, except for maybe McCaffrey or Bijan. So really, for me, I talked about it when I talked about my team. I feel like once you get to this Nakua range here, Nakua and Harrison, Adams, Olave territory, that's where I start to kind of look other directions for a bit. But definitely once I get kind of into the like round 3 where we have Devontae Adams, like a guy that I took, you get into that territory of Adams, Olave, Pittman, Collins, Ayuk, London, Waddle. Like there's guys in there that I want. And then I think there's really good value once you get to the 5th round. So like, I like to try to get receivers a little early. Like typically I would look a little bit more like Herbalicious ish. But like Adams, Mike Evans in the 5th round is really good value right now. Cooper Kupp, I talked about it there. Debo Samuel in the 5th round. DJ Moore in the 5th round. Like that's a really good spot. And then even the 6th round, like I don't like Diggs in the 6th, but like DK Metcalf, Devontae Smith in the 6th round, like Amari Cooper in the 7th, like it's Terry McLaurin in the 7th. Like there's a lot of value in these mid rounds at the receiver position. There's also some really potential busts. Like George Pickens at 7-1. That's pretty risky. Like, we don't know what this offense is going to be. And Arthur Smith hasn't really been able to produce a very good wide receiver, unless your name was AJ Brown. So depends. You think Pickens is more AJ Brown or more Drake London? Tell you everything you need to know about that. But then again, there's just good value throughout the receiver room, but there is a different tier. That top tier, you want to get one of those guys, one elite type of guy, whether it's CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Chase, Brown, Wilson, Nakua, Adams, Harrison, like that. You want one of those guys. Like, you don't want to be your first receiver to be like, I don't know, even Deebo Samuel. Like just Josh. Like, I like Deebo Samuel, but like that's his first receiver in the 5th round. Seems a little scary, like Cooper Kupp even. Like, I like Kupp, but like the 5th round waiting to get a receiver, or even like you said, Genesis with Malik Neighbors as your first receiver. Like, waiting too long, yes, there's value there, but you don't have like the safe value like I talked about with Mike Evans. Like, you don't have a safe bet at that wide receiver position. So that's where I'm at. And then once you get a little bit later, like you said, there's those upside swings. Rice, Addison, Odunze, Ridley, Coleman, Deontay Johnson, JSN, that territory. I think those are where you can start taking some swings for the fences if you'd really like. And then as it gets later, like, there's guys, but like for me personally, I like to go running back later, because what's the upside of some of these receivers? Like Tyler Lockett, he's a top 24 guy getting me 9 points a game. Or Zach Charbonnet, who, if Walker goes down, is going to get me 20 points a game. Like, so once it gets later, I tend to kind of not go as heavy at the receiver position. I'll take one here or there, sprinkle it in if there's some good value late, which you see. Like Cortland Sutton in the 13th, that's real good value. Mike Williams in the 13th, real good value. Jalen Polk at the moment, pretty good value if he's the lead guy there. Brandon Cooks is decent there. Adam Thielen, we talked about. Jerry Jeudy. Like, there's some value down here. But again, you're not expecting any of these guys to be like a top 20 asset by any means. So
yeah,
they're kind of good bench fill-ins.
This board would look a lot different, 10 years ago when everybody was taking, 2 or 3 running backs in the first 4 rounds. Superflex obviously is going to make it a little bit different. These receivers are going to go a round or 2 earlier, but so many receivers in the first 5 rounds that, like, if you wait, then you're going to end up, if you wait for the 5th or 6th round, you're going to get a wide receiver 3 as your wide receiver 1. And I know that, like, there's a clump of 20 guys that you could consider wide receiver 2s. And there's only about 10 guys you'd probably consider, like, you be confident in your wide receiver 1. Mm-hmm. But then after that, it's just a huge, drop off of consistent production. And that's what you're looking for. You want someone that's going to get you 15 to 20 points every week, and not at the end of the season, he finishes as wide receiver 24, but I could only start him 5 times. Like, that's the struggle when you get into those deeper
especially
rounds.
If you're playing like a lineup league where you got to set a lineup. It's just as important that you trust that player as what their upside is. Yeah. Because you have to click and put that name in that lineup. And if you are sitting there with, like, Jahan Dotson, who is, say, 20 points 1 week, 5, 10, like, it's going to be hard for you to start that player. It will. You can say it won't, but it will when you get there. Trust me.
So I know we're getting close. We're getting close on time. Well, we're past the time. Apologize. Tight ends is definitely different. We've seen Kelsey in the first round, then you don't get another tight end for 2 more rounds. Now you're seeing Kelsey as the 2nd tight end off the board. Some cases, the 3rd tight end off the board. But it also kind of condensed these guys. You brought some of the bottom guys up and you brought the top guys down. So you have rounds 3 through 5. Well, actually 3 through 6, you're getting the top guys. Laporta and Kittle in the 3rd. In the 4th, you're getting McBride, Andrews, and Kincaid. You're getting Ingram and Pitts in the 5th. You got Kittle in the 6th. And then, Jake Ferguson in the 7th. And, the common theme for every one of these guys is there's a clear path for them being 1 or 2 on their teams in targets. And everybody that was a top 12 tight end last year was number 2 or number 1 on their team in targets. The top guys are guys that are going to get the higher air yards and the higher red zone targets, which I think, all of these guys check those boxes as well. Kincaid, Andrews, Kelsey, Laporta, you wouldn't be surprised if they were the number 1 if not at least the number 2 on their team in targets. And then George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, like you said it earlier, Brock, it could be a huge. And then you see for me, it's a clear drop off after Ferguson, but Njoku in the 8th round is still a good pick. It just depends on what version of Njoku you get. I actually like Freiermuth. I think he's another guy that could be number 2 on his team in targets. The Atlanta Falcons led they led the NFL in air yards last year to the tight end position, and Freiermuth could get some of those red zone targets, as well as just so many vacated targets left in a place where Roman Wilson and Van Jefferson are your wide receiver 2s.
Hopefully Ayuk.
And maybe that would take Freiermuth down. And that definitely would change things a lot. And then, you see Goddard's gone down quite a bit. Devonta Smith has gone up, and Dallas Goedert's gone down. Taysom Hill was a guy last year who was a pretty consistent option. And unexpectedly was a consistent option at that end position. But again, all these guys down here after that 8th round, I really would not suggest. It's going to be a tough season trying to predict these guys all year. Likely you're hoping Andrews gets hurt. Kmet, he's 4th or 5th after Swift and Dunze and Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. You really just don't. There's not much with these guys, and a lot of them, like I said, have so many people ahead of them that it's just hard. All right, one last thing. Any players on here that should have been drafted? Pope.
2 for me would be Tyler Algier and Jalen Tolbert.
Brock.
Yeah, I had 3 guys here. It was Ricky Pearsall, Darnell Mooney, and then Tyler Conklin.
Yeah. Well, you guys paired up and took my 3. So I think I think those guys are the same ones. I appreciate everybody for coming on. Make sure you give Brock Dynasty, that's at Brock Dynasty, and then at Popes FFH. Give them a follow. As always, good luck this season.